Hello everyone, Trump's tariff policy has been a disaster, and every credible source says that Trump's tariffs are going to increase inflation and reduce business investment and therefore growth, and in the long run they're going to make the incomes of American workers lower. Now, before Trump came into office, there was a big debate. How serious is he really about this tariff thing? We now have the answer to that. But I think what most people couldn't predict and didn't anticipate was just how poorly implemented and how incompetent and just what a mess his policy has been and how badly it's been implemented. So in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why Trump's tariff policy is so bad. And I've got 4 reasons. Number 1, ignores how global trade really works. Number 2, way tariff rates are calculated makes no sense. Number 3, the uncertainty caused by the tariff policy is itself a huge problem. And number 4, bad design and implementation has caused a loss of confidence in the Trump administration. In other words, the policy is bad because it's bad. People have observed these first 3 points and how the policy makes no sense, and that's caused just about everyone to lose confidence in the Trump administration. So going into the first reason, the way global trade works now is we have globalized supply chains, and any good you buy will have parts that are made from all over the world, and it might be assembled in one place using parts from here, there and everywhere. In fact, about 40% of American imports are so-called intermediary goods, which means they're then used to make something else, which could easily be sold on to world markets. So the first countries that Trump tariffed were Canada and Mexico. Now, Canada and Mexico have been working with the United States for decades to become more and more integrated economically. So for example, you'll have a car that's made in the United States using many different parts from Canada. What Trump's tariff policy does is it puts a big tariff on all the different parts that are then used in that car factory to make that car. So you can imagine being a business in America trying to make something in a factory, and you'd be pulling your hair out because Trump is saying that he's trying to bring more manufacturing back to America, but then he's just implemented a policy that makes all your suppliers way more expensive. And American companies now that manufacture something in the United States, or foreign companies that manufacture something in the United States, they have to compete with other companies all over the world that don't have these tariffs on their suppliers. So Trump has made US companies much more uncompetitive. And it's directly contradicted his actual goal that he says he's trying to achieve. And this could easily have been avoided. Any intelligent advisor that Trump has access to could have told about this problem, and they could easily have designed policies that get around this problem. So number 2, the way tariff rates are calculated makes no sense. Trump, on his Liberation Day, he had this big board with all these different tariff rates. And what he was saying was they're going to be reciprocal policies. So if there's tariffs on United States would put up a tariff, and then that creates an easy opportunity to negotiate so that United States can put down its tariff if the other country also does so. But the way the tariffs were calculated had nothing to do with tariff barriers of other countries. It was just that if the United States imports a lot of goods from another country, it will put up a much bigger tariff. But the United States importing many goods from another country and having a big trade deficit with them doesn't necessarily mean that that country is using a lot of tariff barriers or is treating American imports unfairly. Trump just thinks that any trade deficit is bad. So if United States imports a lot of apparel from a country like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, that's bad. If United States imports luxury goods from France, that's bad. Just any kind of imports is bad. And this doesn't make any economic sense, since in many cases, imports from certain countries are going to be a massive increase to the well-being, the economic well-being of American workers. Reason number 3, uncertainty. Now, with these tariffs being announced, if a tariff is announced in a particular country and then the policy changes again and again. Nobody knows where the tariffs are going to be and how high they're going to be. So if you're a business, that leaves no scope for you to respond to the tariffs. You can't respond to the tariffs by building up more manufacturing in America because you don't know if the tariffs will be there in 3 months or 2 years or whatever. So how will businesses respond to this? What they will do is they will think, we've got to avoid making decisions now since we don't have good information about what the policies will be, and they will just wait. And it's even been said that it's even been tried to justify Trump's policy that it's a good negotiation strategy to make the other person, convince them that you're crazy. And presumably, if they think you're crazy, they will be afraid of you and they will submit to your demands. But this doesn't work with business and the overall business climate because there are hundreds of thousands of different investors and businesses all making decisions, and even consumers. And they all need to know what's happening in order to make confident decisions. So if they don't know that, it will cause everyone to be less confident and just to be more cautious and to put off making any decisions. Finally, reason number 4. These problems that I've just outlined, numbers 1, 2, and 3, Trump, the administration, has provided like many different justifications. They said that they're tariffing Canada and Mexico because of fentanyl, which makes no sense, and it works to give them a legal justification under US law, but it's just nonsensical. And that's the thing. What they're saying about why the tariff policy is there changes all the time. The policy changes all the time. But the consistent thing is really the incompetence in that none of it ever makes any sense. Whatever goal the Trump administration says it's trying to pursue, it doesn't match with the actions. And it's just so messy. And everyone has observed this. Financial markets have observed this. Consumers have observed this, US voters, and it leads them to conclude that Trump is much more erratic and wilder than anyone expected, and he's willing to do things that cause massive economic damage, even to the United States, for seemingly no reason. So everyone has reacted to this information by massively downgrading their opinion of the Trump administration and just being very wary of Trump and America in general. And in fact, even the United States debt is being sold off. So the interest rate that United States has to pay on its own debt has increased. And it used to be unthinkable that US Treasury bills have always been considered risk-free assets. Now, no asset is really risk-free, but when US Treasury bills were designated as risk-free, that was because it was assumed that it was completely unthinkable that any country, that the United States would ever default on its own debt. That was assumed to be unthinkable. But now crazy scenarios like that start to seem possible because people are starting to think in the back of their minds, Trump is capable of anything, and he's even made noises about defaulting on the US debt going back for a long time. But when he said those kind of things in the past, people tended to discount it and think, maybe he says a lot of things, he talks a lot of shit, but it's probably not going to happen. Well, now, because of the tariffs, people are thinking maybe he could do just about anything. And that's made people think, just get out of American assets in general. And there's been a huge capital flight away from the United States because there's been a huge loss of confidence in the United States. So that's the reason why the Trump tariff policy has been so bad. And I think there are lots of abstract debates. Well, people can talk about the theory of, does it make sense to have a tariff policy, and can tariffs be beneficial in some circumstances? And maybe they can if you understand what goal you're trying to pursue and you communicate clearly with others about why you're putting the tariff up and how you're doing it, and have a negotiating policy about what you're trying to achieve. But all of that is in the abstract. The actual tariff policies implemented by Trump has just been this crazy mess, different justifications and wild policy changes, all behind this idea that Trump's the great deal maker and he's going to cut a deal with everyone. And it just doesn't make any sense. And the only thing you can conclude is that they don't know what they're doing and they've just lost the plot completely. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'm just telling it like it is, the real truth. It would be silly for me to try and put lipstick on a pig and try and invent some rationale that makes the Trump administration's policy make sense, because it is just nonsense.